I never believed that a normal night could quietly turn into something you carry with you for the rest of your life. I used to think fear needed a reason, a sound, a shape, something you could point at and explain. I was wrong. This started on a night that gave me absolutely no warning. At the time, I was living alone in a small second-floor apartment in an older building. Nothing about the place stood out. It wasn't abandoned or isolated, and no one ever mentioned anything strange about it. It was just affordable, close to work, and quiet enough to sleep in. That night, I came home late, well past midnight. I remember checking my phone before plugging it in. It was 12:47 a.m., and the battery was nearly dead. I told myself I would lie down for a few minutes and fall asleep. The apartment felt quiet, but not in a peaceful way. There was a strange cold in the air, even though the heater was on. It didn't feel like winter cold. It felt empty, like the warmth was being pushed out of the room. The ceiling fan was running, but the sound wasn't steady. It slowed for a moment, then sped up again, repeating over and over. The uneven rhythm started bothering me, so I stood up and turned it off. The silence that followed felt heavy. It pressed against my ears, and I became uncomfortably aware of my own breathing. I sat on the edge of the bed, telling myself I was just tired. The room was dimly lit by a small lamp, and the shadows on the walls seemed longer than they should have been. I ignored it, knowing shadows often look strange in low light. Then I heard something hit the floor. It was a soft sound, like a small object dropping from a short height. I froze and listened. Nothing else followed. I looked down at the floor, expecting to see something, but there was nothing there. I told myself it could have been the building settling or a sound from another apartment. I lay back down and closed my eyes, trying to relax. Less than a minute later, I heard another sound. This one was different. It sounded like something being dragged slowly across the floor. I opened my eyes immediately. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. Old buildings make noise, I reminded myself. Pipes scrape, floors shift. But this sound wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from inside the room. I sat up, and the sound stopped instantly, as if it knew I was listening. The air felt heavier, and breathing suddenly took effort. I stood up, and when my bare feet touched the floor, I felt how cold it was, far colder than it should have been. I glanced toward the kitchen area. It was dark, but not just unlit. The darkness felt thick, almost solid, like it had depth. I didn't like looking at it, so I turned away and went to the bathroom to get some water, hoping to calm myself down. When I looked in the mirror, my face seemed normal at first, but my eyes didn't. They looked alert in a way that didn't match how tired I felt, like my body knew something my mind was still refusing to accept. I left the bathroom and went back into the room. As soon as I sat down on the bed, my phone vibrated. It was an incoming call from an unknown number, but it ended before I could answer. When I checked, there was no missed call notification and nothing in the call log. It was as if the call had never existed. That didn't make sense, and a strange thought crossed my mind, one I immediately tried to ignore. I stayed sitting on the bed, fully awake now. I didn't turn the fan back on, and I didn't turn the light off. Then I heard it, a sound so quiet that at first I thought I imagined it. Someone whispered my name, just once, not loudly and not aggressively. It came from inside the apartment. I didn't move or breathe. Every part of my body locked up at the same time. I waited for logic to explain what I had heard, but nothing did. There was no confusion in the sound. It wasn't random, and it wasn't a noise. It was intentional. That was the moment I realized something important. Whatever was happening wasn't an accident, and whatever had entered my night had already noticed me. After hearing my name whispered, I stayed completely still, convincing myself that if I didn't move, whatever caused it might stop. Seconds passed, then minutes. Nothing else happened.
The silence returned, but it no longer felt neutral. It felt deliberate, like something was waiting for a reaction. I told myself the whisper could have been my imagination. The mind does strange things when it's tired. I repeated that thought until it almost sounded believable. Eventually, I stood up and checked the apartment. I looked under the bed, inside the closet, and behind the bathroom door. Everything was exactly where it should be. I was alone. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. I locked the front door, even though I was already sure it was locked. I checked the windows. Closed, secure, no signs of anyone being there. Still, the feeling didn't leave. It followed me back to the bedroom and settled in my chest like weight. I sat on the bed again and picked up my phone, thinking a distraction might help. That's when I noticed something strange. The time was wrong. It still said 12:59 a.m. I knew more time had passed than that. I had walked around the apartment, checked every room. At least 10 minutes should have gone by. I unlocked the phone and refreshed the screen. The time didn't change. I stood there staring at it, feeling a slow sense of unease crawl up my spine. Phones don't just freeze like that, especially not unlocked. I tried opening an app. Nothing responded. The screen was bright, but the phone felt dead, like it wasn't connected to anything. Then the lights flickered. Just once. The lamp dimmed and returned to normal so quickly I might have missed it if I wasn't already on edge. My heart started pounding. I told myself it was a power issue. Maybe someone in the building turned something on. I didn't believe it, but I needed something to hold on to. I set the phone down, and that's when I heard breathing. It wasn't loud, it wasn't close enough to feel, but it was in the room, slow, controlled, and not mine. I held my breath, listening. The breathing continued, steady and calm, as if whoever or whatever was making it had no reason to rush. I turned my head slowly toward the sound, already knowing I wouldn't see anything. The room looked exactly the same, empty, normal, but the breathing didn't stop. It didn't react to me listening. It just existed. That's when panic finally hit. I stood up, my legs shaking, and said out loud, "Who's there?" My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded small. The breathing stopped immediately. The silence that followed was worse. Before I could move again, I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, not movement, a presence. The kind you feel without seeing or hearing anything. Every instinct in my body screamed that I wasn't alone anymore. Then, something touched my shoulder. It wasn't a grab. It wasn't aggressive, just pressure, like fingers resting there gently, confidently, as if it had every right to touch me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't turn around. My body refused to respond. A voice spoke close to my ear, not whispering this time, calm, clear. "You heard me before." The moment those words registered, the pressure vanished. I spun around, but there was nothing there. No one. The room was empty again. The lights were steady. The silence returned. But I knew something had changed. Whatever this was, it wasn't hiding anymore. It wasn't testing. It had acknowledged me, spoken to me, and somehow, deep down, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a continuation, and whatever had found me that night had no intention of leaving.
After that voice spoke to me, I didn't sleep. I didn't even sit down. I stood in the middle of the room, turning slowly, expecting something to move, to appear, to confirm what had just happened. Nothing did. The apartment looked exactly the same as it always had. That was the worst part. If something had looked wrong, I might have been able to react. Instead, everything looked normal, and my mind had nowhere to place the fear. I checked the time again. The phone still showed 12:59 a.m. It didn't matter how many times I locked the screen or tried to restart it, the number never changed. I started to feel like time itself had stalled, like the night was holding its breath along with me.
I decided I couldn't stay there. Whatever this was, staying felt dangerous. I grabbed my keys and went to the front door. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the key into the lock. When I finally turned it, the lock clicked, but the door didn't open. It felt heavier than normal, like something on the other side was pushing back. I pulled harder. Nothing. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The chain lock was still on. I never used the chain. I stood there staring at it, trying to remember putting it on earlier. I couldn't. I unlocked it slowly and pulled again. This time, the door opened without resistance, swinging inward like nothing had ever been wrong. The hallway outside was empty, too empty. No lights were on, no sound came from any of the other apartments. Even the usual background noise of the building was gone. I stepped out and looked down the hall, then back into my apartment. The inside looked darker from the outside than it should have, like the light wasn't reaching the doorway. I didn't step out. I closed the door and locked it again. As soon as the lock clicked, I heard footsteps. They weren't running. They weren't rushing. They moved at the exact pace I would have used if I were walking slowly across the room. One step, then another, each one deliberate. But I wasn't moving. The footsteps stopped directly behind me. I didn't turn around. I already knew what would happen if I did. Instead, I stood there listening to the sound of breathing again, closer this time, close enough that I could feel it on the back of my neck. I whispered, "What do you want?" The answer didn't come from behind me. It came from inside my head. "You already know." Suddenly, the room felt different. Not colder, not darker, smaller, like the walls had moved in slightly without making a sound. I backed away from the door, my legs weak, and sat down on the edge of the bed. That's when I noticed something else was wrong. The room layout felt off. The lamp sat at a slightly different angle, small details that didn't add up. It felt like a perfect imitation of my apartment, but not the real thing. I looked toward the mirror across the room and froze. My reflection wasn't copying me exactly. I raised my hand. The reflection followed, but just a fraction of a second too late. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to be unsettling. I lowered my hand. Same delay. Then the reflection smiled. I hadn't. I stumbled back, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. When I looked again, the reflection was normal, staring back at me with the same fear on its face. I couldn't trust it anymore. I turned the mirror toward the wall. The breathing started again. This time it came from everywhere, not just one spot. The ceiling, the corners, behind the walls. Slow, patient, surrounding me. I felt watched in a way I had never experienced before. Not like being observed, but like being studied. Like something was learning me, memorizing how I reacted, how I moved, how I broke. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't trying to scare me away. It was trying to understand me. The moment I realized it was studying me, the air in the room changed. It no longer felt distant or hidden. It felt close, too close. The breathing stopped, and that silence carried a warning. I had the overwhelming sense that if I moved the wrong way, something irreversible would happen. I slowly stood up from the bed. My legs felt weak, like they didn't fully belong to me anymore. As soon as I straightened, the mattress behind me sank slightly, as if someone had just stood up from it too. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel the space behind me filling with something that didn't want to be seen. A pressure settled against my back, not enough to push me forward, but enough to let me know it was there. I felt it lean in, close enough that the air around my neck shifted. My skin broke out in chills. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body stayed frozen. Then I felt fingers. They pressed into my arm, slow and deliberate, tracing upward toward my shoulder. The touch wasn't rough. That somehow made it worse. It felt curious, possessive, like it was confirming something it had already decided. I whispered, "Please," without knowing what I was asking for. The fingers tightened. My vision blurred and the room tilted slightly, like I was losing balance even though I was standing still. The pressure on my arm suddenly disappeared, and I gasped, stumbling forward. When I turned around, there was nothing there. No one. The space behind me was empty. But the bed was no longer smooth. The sheets were creased, indented, like someone had just been sitting there. Slowly, without any visible force, the indentation deepened. The mattress sank further, as if invisible weight was pressing down on it. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. I couldn't look anywhere else. The bed dipped again, and then I heard it. A soft, satisfied sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a breath. Then something crawled. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it moving across the mattress, the fabric shifting under unseen weight. The sound stopped at the edge of the bed. I knew exactly where it was without seeing it, right in front of me. The temperature dropped so suddenly that my teeth began to chatter. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. I felt that pressure again, this time against my chest, pushing me back into the wall. My feet lifted slightly off the floor before dropping back down. My ears rang as a voice spoke, low and close. "You feel it now." I screamed. The lights went out instantly. In complete darkness, I felt hands on my face, not covering my mouth, not attacking, holding my head still, forcing me to stay where I was. My heartbeat was so loud I thought it might drown out everything else. I felt something brush across my cheek, then pause right in front of my lips. A breath that wasn't warm or cold, just wrong, too controlled, too intentional. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The lights came back on. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, my throat burning from screaming. The bed was normal again. No marks, no indentations. The room looked untouched. But my arm burned. When I looked down, red marks were forming where the fingers had pressed into my skin, perfectly shaped, perfectly placed. That was when I understood something clearly for the first time that night. This was no longer about fear. It was about ownership. I stayed on the floor for a long time after the lights came back on, afraid that standing up would somehow invite it back. My arm throbbed where the marks were forming, and I didn't need to look at them again to know they were real. That pain was grounding, and at the same time it terrified me. It meant none of this was in my head. Eventually, I pushed myself up, leaning against the wall. My entire body felt wrong, like I had woken up in a place that only looked familiar. The apartment felt quieter than before, but not empty. It felt alert. I told myself I had to leave. Whatever it took, I couldn't stay there until morning. I grabbed my jacket and keys, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to look at the bed or the mirror. I moved toward the door, step by step, waiting for the pressure to return. Halfway across the room, the lights dimmed again. This time, they didn't come back on. The darkness was immediate and complete, swallowing the room in seconds. I reached out blindly, my hand shaking, and felt the wall. My breathing grew shallow. I could feel something else breathing too, slow and steady, matching my movements as if it was circling me. Then the darkness changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating. I felt the room stretch and distort, like the walls were moving farther away while something else moved closer. My ears rang, and I felt a deep vibration in my chest, like the sound was coming from inside me. A shape began to form. Not clearly, not all at once, just enough for my brain to recognize it as wrong. It stood in front of me, taller than it should have been, its outline constantly shifting, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to look like. I couldn't see a face, but I knew it was looking directly at me. "You understand now," the voice said. It wasn't coming from one place. It filled the room, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. I tried to speak, but my throat locked up. Every instinct told me this was the moment everything ended, that whatever this thing was, it had been leading me here from the start. The shape moved closer. As it did, memories that weren't mine began flooding my mind. Flashes of other rooms, other nights, other people frozen in fear just like me. I felt their panic, their confusion, their realization that they had been chosen. The voice spoke again, calmer now. "You heard me. You stayed. You belong here." The air grew heavier, crushing down on me. I dropped to my knees, unable to stay upright. The pressure on my chest became unbearable, and my vision started to fade at the edges. In that moment, a single thought cut through the terror. If this thing fed on attention, on acknowledgement, on being known, then maybe resistance was the only way left. I squeezed my eyes shut and whispered, "No." The room shook violently. A sound erupted, sharp and piercing, like metal tearing through concrete. The pressure vanished all at once, throwing me forward onto the floor. I hit hard, the breath knocked out of me. When I looked up, the lights were on. The room was normal. The shape was gone. I lay there shaking, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. The silence returned, but this time it felt wounded, broken. I waited for it to speak again. It didn't, but I knew, deep down, that this wasn't a victory. It was a pause. Morning came quietly, too quietly. I woke up on the floor where I had collapsed, the light from the window cutting across the room as if nothing had happened. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was over, that it had all been a stress-induced nightmare brought on by exhaustion and fear. Then I saw my arm. The marks were still there, darker now, clearer, finger-shaped bruises wrapping around my skin exactly where I remembered them. The sight of them made my stomach turn. Dreams don't leave marks like that. I stood up slowly, every muscle aching, and looked around the apartment. Everything was normal. The bed was made, the mirror reflected me perfectly, the air felt warmer, lighter, almost safe. Almost. I checked the time on my phone. It read 6:12 a.m. The night had finally moved on. Whatever had frozen time before had let it go. That alone made me uneasy. I left the apartment that morning and didn't come back. I packed what I could later during the day with a friend standing beside me the entire time. I never explained what happened. I didn't think anyone would believe me, and honestly, I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it felt like an invitation. Life went on after that. I moved. I changed routines. I avoided being alone at night whenever I could. And for a while, nothing happened. The memory faded just enough for me to function, but it never fully left. Then the small things started. My phone would ring once and stop. Unknown numbers, no call history. Sometimes the time would freeze for a second before correcting itself. I would hear breathing when I was sure I was alone, always faint, always just enough to notice. I told myself it was trauma, residual fear, my mind trying to make sense of something it never could. Until one night, months later, when I was lying in bed in a completely different apartment in a completely different city, and I heard it again. My name, just once, spoken calmly, from inside the room. I didn't move. I didn't respond. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding, knowing exactly what it meant. It had never been tied to the apartment. It had been tied to me. And now that it knows I can hear it, it doesn't need to introduce itself anymore.